Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here, and on today's episode of Desert Lore, we're visiting one of my favorite museums on earth. It's one that I used to work at briefly as the art and exhibit director. It's the Prehistoric Museum here in Price, Utah. This is an incredible museum of both archaeology and paleontology. It's got an amazing collection. Now, one of the things about this museum, anytime you go to a museum, doing a video like this, like I love to teach, and I'll stop guests and just start talking to them and teaching normally. But there's something that feels very pretentious about filming and teaching. So I'm very self-aware of this. Going through it, I just was in there, bought tickets, and it's like there's a lot of people there. So I'm going to try to do my best because I don't want to disrespect anybody who's visiting here and kind of mess up their personal experience. But I want you to be able to have the chance to go around. If you ever get a chance to visit the museum, you absolutely should. Now, one thing I got to talk about right up front, because I would talk about this in here, but I don't want to do it right in front of people. So one of the things this museum is famous for is the Utah raptor. Now, as a paleo artist, and having worked here as a paleo artist, one of the things is we do the best we can to try to depict animals accurately. But sometimes artists do it with a bit of flair that isn't 100% accurate. So out front, years ago, they wanted to do, in honor of Utah raptor that this museum is famous for, they wanted to do a sculpture, and several different artists submitted their their suggestions here, and the one that got chosen was a very active, dramatic pose, a really cool pose, and it's kind of standing out sideways, kicking, looks really cool. Well, one of the later directors of the museum went and was like, okay, well, let's, we have this Utah raptor articulated skeleton. It's up top, but why don't we have it when people come into the museum? Why don't we have it where people can see it and it matches the same posture as that statue that we commissioned? The statue looks great. The articulated Utah raptor, this new articulation, seems a little off for me. It doesn't quite do it. It seems a little strained, like maybe this would not be as much of an accurate pose in real life, but it's still really cool. But I want to mention that outside because I don't want to be disrespectful to any staff here, because it's really cool. Utah raptor is an incredible animal. Now, why part of this is important? Years ago, the book Jurassic Park was written. And when Jurassic Park was written, in the book, there are velociraptors, and in the book, they were described accurately. I've articulated velociraptor skeletons myself. They're not very big. They're like a big coyote, between a coyote and a wolf. That's how big they were in the book, Jurassic Park. And I was even listening to the audiobook of Jurassic Park on this trip on the way here, so I'm very well versed in this. Well, when they made the movie Jurassic Park, they went to a paleontologist and said, hey, we want to make these bigger. And how big can we make velociraptors to be scarier for the movie? And it was Jack Horner, was a paleontologist, very famous paleontologist. And he said, well, Deinonychus is a cousin of velociraptor. That's a bit bigger. You could make him maybe kind of this tall. And again, if you watch my videos when I go to the Blanding Dinosaur Museum, there's some beautiful Deinonychus, both life recreations. Some of them are unfeathered, and then the updated versions feathered. It's really cool. Well, so they went with that. They said, okay, well, Jack Horner says we can make him about this tall. And then the company they had doing the raptors, they made him this big. They made him too big, way too big, much larger than velociraptors, and definitely larger than even Deinonychus. Well, after the movie came out, Utah raptor was formally described, and Utah raptor is a member of that family, the Dromaeosauridae family, and it is actually the same size as what you had in the movie Jurassic Park. So it's one of those rare instances where Hollywood got it right first. But enough yakking about that. I wanted to just get that out up front. Let's go inside and take a look at this incredible museum. So this is the famous re-articulation of Utah raptor from what they used to have upstairs. And this is the proof of concept original statue that was submitted and approved, and the bigger statue that you have outside the museum now was based off of the approval of this original maquette. But you can see on the tail, the tendons, ossified tendons making the tail stiff. Enormous front claws, ulna and radius. And you see this right here, this is a wishbone, non-flighted dinosaur, and yet you have a wishbone because these are closely related to what we have today as modern birds. One of the coolest dinosaurs ever. This is something that's really appreciated about this articulation is what ended up being a keel bone there. The sternum doesn't normally get preserved in dinosaurs, but having a sternum like there is often not included in a life depiction. But it is on this. Very well done. Now coming into the paleontology hall, have a beautiful life recreation of an allosaurus. Allosaurus is our state fossil. And a lot of the old depictions really depict them uncharacteristically beefy. This is very accurate. Now, one of the things as a paleo artist, and I'm guilty of this too, is in order to try to make them accurate, we'll draw the skeleton first, and then we just kind of flesh it out, almost shrink wrapped. If you look up, you can see the holes where the skull would be. So there's a modern movement among paleo artists to try to make them chunkier, because in likelihood they were chunkier, but I like them looking more like this. Just kind of the way I see things. I have an exhibit here about dino brain cases. This right here is Camarasaurus, which is a sauropod. This is one of the first dinosaurs that had chewing. And if you look at the molars, I mean, they're not true molars, but they're proto-molars. So this is not a grazer, this is a browser that would actually do some chewing. And then you have a beautiful allosaurus. Again, this is our state fossil. This is the king of the Jurassic in North America. This is millions of years before Tyrannosaurus Rex. And an articulation of a juvenile allosaurus. Now, normally to do something like this, you'll just take a full size and do a recreation and 3D print something smaller and then mold and cast that. I don't know that any full juvenile allosauruses have been found. So this is speculative work, but it still makes sense. Now this skeleton is largely articulated from recreations, but you can see, if you look close on the bones, you see the darker, more textured parts are the original bone, and then you have to fill in the gaps. So you can see on the pelvis there, iliatic crest. Now this is a puncture wound in an Allosaurus vertebrae presumed by Stegosaurus. So here's a Stegosaurus spike. Here's a Stegosaurus back plate. And this is an Allosaurus tail vertebrae with the Stegosaurus having pierced through it. You can see a Stegosaurus over there on the other side. We'll go take a look at him in a minute. This is a femur of a Potosaurus, and it's been cut. And if you look at the inside, fossilization happens from the outside in. And so agate and jasper will often replace, even down to the level of blood vessels on the inside. So you can still see the structure of the hollow bone, even though it has been completely replaced by minerals. These are ammonites. Ammonites or cephalopods, they're in the squid and octopus family. Some of these got huge, but they had a shell. These are different prehistoric shark teeth. Sharks never run out of teeth. They keep growing teeth their entire life, like a conveyor belt. And this is like a 4-foot wide oyster fossil.
You go through that and you're like, okay, this is, changes your whole.
Yeah, we really understand.
This is a Lambeosaurus skull. This is a hadrosaur. Remember the duck-billed dinosaur family. And very advanced teeth. If you look at the teeth, again, proto-molars for chewing. Chewing was very unusual during dinosaur times for any animal. But members of this hadrosaur family had this. Now in this area, we get a lot of fossilized dinosaur tracks. And we'll probably see quite a few here at the museum. This is a cast of Archaeopteryx, which was one of the earliest flying dinosaurs that eventually led to birds. Oh my gosh, it's my enemy in the wild. These guys, these are phytosaurs. Phytosaurs look like crocodiles. They came before crocodiles, and they're kind of like if crocodiles were made by a committee of curmudgeon-y people that couldn't agree on anything. They have all the hallmarks of what makes a crocodile, but they don't do it nearly as well. They lasted a long time, but they eventually got out-competed by crocodiles. Now before that, you had things like this. This is the skull of a giant prehistoric amphibian. Before crocodilians and before phytosaurs did their thing, you had amphibians that were the size of crocodiles filling the same roles as crocodiles. Now this is one of the coolest dinosaurs. This is Coelophysis, and I've talked about this on other videos. There's a dinosaur graveyard where a bunch of these got killed in like a flash flood, and there's literally thousands of these skeletons, and they're on the Ghost Ranch, where a famous artist called Georgia O'Keeffe, it was on her ranch where all these skeletons were found. Most people don't know that. They separate those two facts. But Coelophysis is a very famous dinosaur here in the western states. And again, we have thousands of these that all seemed to have died in mass. You have the lab, where people, nobody's in there right now, it's where they do the work. Usually when a dinosaur is uncovered, there's not much of it all together. There's disarticulated bones, and it's up to a paleontologist to piece them together and to fill in the gaps. This is a good panel where you have original bone of an allosaurus. You got the pelvis, you got the femurs, you have the spine, but you can see they put in a cast of an allosaurus skull up above, and they've drawn in the legs as well. So having worked in museums for years, I know the matrix in back is not real. They've taken real bones and put them in to make something more interpretive so that it's more meaningful to somebody who's looking at it. So they don't just think, I'm looking at a bone. They can actually understand what you're looking at. This is Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus was my favorite dinosaur when I was a very little kid until I came up and found out about Deinonychus, and then that quickly became my favorite. Now, one of the things that we do not know, you see these plates on the back. They're usually depicted offset from each other, overlapping. You see how these kind of overlap? We do not know if that's how they were actually oriented. They might have been side by side, running parallel with each other. We don't know. But stegosaurs are a very large genre with many members of this clade. And some of them have bigger spines, some of them have smaller, some of them have tons of spikes all over. But one thing that's really neat about this is you get the armor fossilized occasionally like this. This is what you see under the neck. protecting the throat. This museum has a nice kids area and depiction with a semi-feathered Utah raptor. The hands are in the accurate position. But again, there's like a fossil dig area. This is always good for kids. I think kids and adults both need kind of tactile interaction with the world around us. Now, it used to be, when I worked here, one of these drawers you would open up and it was filled with fossil sand tiger shark teeth. And you could just get one for free for visiting the museum. This is an animal long before dinosaurs. This is Dimetrodon. This is actually related to mammals. Doesn't look like it. And unfortunately, dinosaur toy kid packs always throw this in. This is in no way, shape, or form a dinosaur. And it probably actually had primitive fur, but it also had this big old sailback. So again, this is millions of years before dinosaurs. And again, this is related to us. This is a cousin of mammals. It's not even a reptile. That's Dimetrodon. Very famous, very iconic. These are fossil trilobites. Trilobites are fun to collect. We have a lot of them in Utah, and they lived all over the world. Now this here in the center, that's a horseshoe crab, and there's an isopod. So this one here and this one here are still around today, but we're also cousins of trilobites, living at the same time as trilobites. But trilobites themselves have long since gone extinct. And we have here a display with crinoids and horn coral. See the horn coral down below? It's a very common fossil here in Utah and often gets replaced by agate, which is a semi-precious gemstone. So you'll have those beautiful shapes, but in beautiful agate. Now crinoids are still alive today, but they used to grow 50, 60 feet long. These are basically like starfish with a neck. And they grew anciently. We have a few left today, like sea lilies. But again, this is a crinoid fossil. So sometimes even an individual bone has to be pieced together. We have a type of putty that's a cool, dry putty that takes all day to harden. So you see this clear gray stuff between the rest of the bone. You fill in the gaps with that. And it's tacky, and within one day it will harden. At first it's almost as soft as like Jello, and then you just feed it into the gaps like that, and you can see all these real bones with these gaps. Then you can take one of those, make a silicone rubber mold, and then pour a polyurethane cast, and you can make as many copies as you want, which I did several of those while I was working here of Utah raptor. Here's some really good crinoid fossils. You can see these are the kind of the head part that does the feeding. Hopefully we can get a good look at those. Have a lot of minerals in this area too. There's a lot of mining, so there's a good mineral collection here. But again, I'm mostly here to look at the dinosaurs and also look at the archaeological Native American stuff. But there's gypsum in the back, selenite, that big old flat crystal. That is what your drywall is made out of. This is another thing that's really famous in the area. See this black stuff? It looks like obsidian. This is called gilsonite, and that is super lightweight. It feels like it's made out of cardboard, and it's a natural asphalt that's used in a lot of processes, a lot of industrial processes. You got a nice geode here, got boronite, some variscite, and malachite. Usually if you see green, it means there's some sort of copper in there. But again, nice little mineral display in here. I always love these kind of ideas of the great halls, having like a big open hall with articulated dinosaur skeletons. There's something that captivates our imagination, has since the 1800s and does even today. I think people need to see museums like this. I think it's good, especially for kids, to understand that we're not the top of the food chain. You know, modern day, we've kind of killed our way to that point, but we're still subjected to the same things that wiped out dinosaurs, things like asteroids and things like that. But it's interesting to feel that there were real live monsters. They're not around anymore, so they can't harm us, but they were once here. And then you get older and to study and learn about the fact that they turn into birds. It's incredible. Up here, there is a pterosaur skeleton. I don't know what species this is, but it's probably an early Jurassic species. It has teeth. Kind of by the end of the age of dinosaurs, most pterosaurs had a beak. It was much lighter weight. It's always hard to do justice. Pterosaurs are such amazing creatures, but without that wing membrane, it's hard to display in any meaningful way. It's still really cool. Now on the Stegosaurus, take a look at these plates. These plates, you see these grooves that run vertically. Those grooves are believed to have been blood vessels running up and down the whole length. So there was a thin membrane of skin covering these plates, and it's believed that they could change colors. Just, you have certain animals doing that today, like a lot of birds. You have condors, turkey vultures, they'll flush blood to change the colors of their skin. And we believe that that's what happened on these plates. That they weren't so much for protection as much as for display. And if you can change bright colors for display or to show threat or, you know, to show sexual preference, things like that, pretty incredible. This is a fun addition. This is a Uintatherium. This is long after the dinosaurs, but long before us. It's a very robust species. It's a presumed plant eater, but look at those fangs. About the size of a rhino. One of the things we always see this happen with animals, take a look at this rear pelvis. Look how splayed out it is. It's totally splayed out. This is no different than a cow today or giant ground sloth. If you are eating plants, it's hard to get much nutrition out of that. So having a bigger gastrointestinal area with extra stomachs and a wider pelvis to accommodate that, no matter what species of mammal, that always seems to develop. It's really cool. Take a look at the feet. These feet, very similar to like rhinoceros feet. Good splayed out toes, good for offering support. But again, a very unique animal. Eyes were right here, and ears came out up here. But again, look at those fangs. So there's molars for eating plant material, but then there's these big old fangs, and we don't know if those are for fighting, or were they for display, or were they part of their feeding process? We don't know. There's some other smaller species. We have early mammals, turtles, bats. These are all from the Eocene, from what we call the Green River Formation. These are alligator gar, type of fish that's still alive today. There's a lot of insects and fish as well. Shells, leaves. And these are some other early mammals of the Eocene that, again, we don't really have anything to compare these to today. This thing was similar to a rhino, but we don't have anything to compare it to today. These are some more Eocene mammals, and again, you know, they kind of depicted it here looking like a pig, but we don't have anything analogous today to really compare these two. But look at that sagittal crest up above, and look how big the jaw muscles were to close the mouth on this thing. Whatever this thing was, it had a bite force unlike literally any other mammal today. These are early mammals of the Eocene. And again, nothing that we can really truly compare them to today. It's really easy when you go into a paleontology museum to blow past the plants because animals are so much more exciting. But again, these are some of the earliest plants. And they look very familiar, but again, these were groundbreaking for the time when these species first evolved. Deciduous plants were not a thing. And so some of the earliest deciduous leaves like this are actually pretty incredible. You have entire pieces of petrified wood that are massive. This is an early Therizinosaurus. Therizinosaurs were members of the raptor family that evolved to be herbivores. And if you look close at those teeth, those are not the teeth of a killer, but you can see they're still swept back like a meat eater. Now, this is from the only Therizinosaur that's been found in the United States. It's called Falcarius. And you can see it back there. If you want to see the skeleton of this individual, go to the University of Utah Museum. But again, these are bones from Falcarius. This family eventually evolved into being the giant ground sloths of the dinosaur world. They got huge, and I'll put some clips up showing just how massive they got. The Blanding Museum has a really nice life creation of how big these guys got. This guy right here is about 15 feet long, really skinny, and you can still see kind of that raptor heritage in his build. These are elements of Gastonia, which is one of actually the coolest members of the ankylosaur family. This is a very good reconstruction. You can see how those spines on the back overlapped like blades. Other ankylosaurs just had a big old club at the end of the tail, but he didn't. He had these osteoderms that overlapped like blades, like a chainsaw. And then up on the front of the back there, you can see, offered a lot of protection. And I think we're gonna see a skeleton of this guy in a second. Now if you see this back here, that was a project I helped on. And this right here is where we used to have the Utah raptor skeleton. We don't anymore. We've got a brachiosaur life recreation and a sauropod foot. And this ankylosaur, this is a bigger species, but this is Gastonia. And you look, see how these osteoderms, they're just like blades, and if the tail moved back and forth, those would overlap and cut. These are the bony cores underneath. They would have been longer and sharper and covered with keratin. So again, this is one of the dinosaurs that this museum is very famous for. And again, these osteoderms up front here, those are long. Those are like 12, 15 inches long. They would have been covered with keratin, would have been much longer and much sharper in life. There's another ankylosaur. Oh, they do have a Falcarius. Huh. Okay, this is a cast. The original's up at the U of U, so this is the one we're looking at that evolved from the raptor family and eventually became like giant ground sloths. But at this stage, they may have just been a herbivore. But eventually, they evolved into some of the weirdest looking dinosaurs on Earth. This is spotlighting some of the dinosaurs that this museum specifically is known for, including Utah raptor. But again, these are beautifully done life recreations. These were done after I was here. This is a hadrosaur, Prosaurolophus. It's a duck-billed dinosaur. And again, very advanced teeth for its time period. Protomolars, able to chew. And there's a lot of display of some pretty epic dinosaur tracks here. Now this is a ceratopian. Looks like Triceratops. This is much, much smaller than Triceratops. This is Chasmosaurus. And again, very advanced protomolars. Look at these teeth. Again, chewing was kind of a new idea by the Cretaceous into the dinosaur era. More and more dinosaurs were doing actual chewing. And you see this crest. It's presumed that skin covered those holes and probably was filled with blood vessels that could make it show bright colors. This horn up front, you can see from the grooves on it that it would have grown out much further, probably out to here, and been more pointed, had keratin growing over it. But you look at the feet, and again, if you're a large animal, you have to have feet that will disperse your weight. And so again, this is very similar to that Uintatherium we saw a few minutes ago, and it's very similar to like modern day elephants and large animals that have to disperse a lot of weight. Beautiful creature. So this lineage right here, this is the Ceratopians. There, again, Triceratops is arguably the most famous, the most recognizable member of the family. But Triceratops was by far the largest member of the Ceratopians. They came in all sizes. The smallest members of the family, like Cicadasaurus, actually were bipedal. They walked on 2 legs, and they had little horns sticking out, but they didn't have that big, full, beautiful crest. And they got all the way up to as big as Triceratops, which was taller than the ceiling. A lot of people don't realize just how big Triceratops was. So again, they're a very broad and diverse family. And it's always cool to see just how far-ranging nature can go, evolving different shapes and sizes. This is a member of the Elasmotherium family. So basically like your plesiosaurs, this is an ocean animal. And if you're in the ocean, things are always moving and slippery. So it does a lot of good to have teeth that are kind of swept forward to help get something as it's trying to swim away. For an ocean creature, this evolved from a land animal, and you can see it's got a really powerfully built sagittal crest. So this had quite a tremendous bite force. But again, it's mostly a fish hunter. Now we're walking into the archaeological half of the museum. And you can see right there, we'll get down and see him up closer. This is a Columbian mammoth. It's one of the biggest mammals that ever lived. And something that was here just a few thousand years ago. But we're gonna look up closer. But first we're gonna go around top. It's kind of a split level museum. We're gonna look at some of the artifacts around up top here, and then we'll go down below. Now, first of all, we're gonna see a lot more by this artist. This artist is Joe Venus. He was a neighbor of mine. He just lived one street over from me growing up. And he did a lot of this work trying to depict Fremont people, the people we call, we don't know what they call themselves, but the Fremont people. And again, he would go to some of these sites in 9 Mile Canyon and depict actual petroglyph sites and depict what may it have looked like, the people who actually made them. We're going to see many more pieces of art by Joe Venus. But again, amazing artwork. And again, this was a neighbor of mine growing up. So we have some beautiful pieces here. In today's jewelry, we don't think a lot about jewelry. Just one bead is so valuable. And if you look back here, see, I'm gonna try to zoom in here, get you a better look. These are fish hooks. And from the looks of it, the cordage being used for that fishing line is a plant called dogbane. It's very strong, very common, and again, those fish hooks, those are like an inch and a half long, those fish hooks. So those are some big fish. But again, shells and bones are a way to use ornamentation. Now back there's a basket weaver kit. So there's a woven pouch, but again, there's awls that are used as part of the basket making process. And in back, there's a bird effigy. Figurative depiction in ceramics in this area were not as common. In this area, most of the items on display here are normally attributed to the Fremont culture, but there's all types of baskets. Some of them are very loose weave, and some of them are even woven tight enough to be able to hold water. But it's interesting to see, again, these different types. Here's another very loose style. And this looks like it may have had pigments as well. Now these are reeds that were harvested for making projectiles. And you have stones that are lithics. These are part of a cache. So you make your flakes, and a flake you might be able to use later on to make arrowheads. Let me zoom in here. Here are some really tiny arrowheads. Normally people call these bird points because the incorrect assumption was that these were only big enough to be used for hunting birds, but it turns out even these very small projectile points are perfectly good for hunting big game. There's bits of corn. Corn was grown around here. This is believed, come on, focus here. Zoom out. Got an arrow quiver, bits of pottery, and shovels, which we don't normally think about being used. Here's a basket. It says it's woven out of sagebrush, but that looks to be more likely juniper bark. That doesn't look like sage. That's what it's listed as, though. But if you've actually done cordage, that looks more like sage. I mean, like juniper. It's a very large basket. Now, a lot of times we don't think much about how important cordage was. Being able to make cordage was really good for everything, for weaving, for making snares. And here's part of a snare, for catching rabbits and animals, things like that. It's a very important skill to have, to make rope, all different kinds of things. And it's a good trade item. If you just have a bundle like this in and of itself would be very valuable to turn around and use. You know, somebody went to the effort to make it, and if you've already made it, then that's going to prove valuable for trade. Okay, here's some really good small pendants. The lighting is dim in here, which is unfortunate, but that is good to help keep the artifacts preserved. So again, there's bits of turquoise, shell, bone, bits of broken ceramic that are then turned into beads. Really little turquoise piece, but again, and there's a sewing awl. Oh, nice. Okay. See that piece right there? That is banded tiger shirt. That only comes from one place in Wyoming. It was traded from Wyoming as far south as Mexico. We find pieces of it in Mexico. So this was a very valuable. You can't see just how striped it is in this shot, but it's incredibly beautiful stuff. And again, it was highly prized anciently. This is a really cool piece. This is a basket that has been made waterproof with pine pitch glue, and then it becomes a water jug. And you can see there's woven hair, probably human hair, woven for the handles. But this is like a water bottle, something you can use, to be able to haul water. If you don't want to haul it in a clay vessel, it's surprisingly heavy. These things are surprisingly heavy. I've held them before, and they're just as heavy as something clay. If you make it waterproofed inside out with pine pitch, it's as heavy as clay, but it's not going to break. There's a wide range of ceramics, and some of these definitely seem more modern. There used to be a wider range on display here, but I think what happened is that a lot of these artifacts were repatriated to the tribes, which, you know, there's obviously mixed arguments on that side, but there's nothing wrong with repatriating. But the question is, who are the descendants of the people who use these? People move in and out of areas and take over and leave and come back, and new people come in. So the people who have been here for the past 500 years, are these the people, same people who were 1,000 years ago? It's a tough one to know. This is an interesting piece where this has holes, and so there's actually kind of like leather strands for a handle. And this one here has a corrugated texture. I'll call this a Native American microwave. Having those corrugations makes it able to heat up food much faster than a smooth pot of the same size and shape. So those corrugations likely started off as just something normal, just like something for decoration, but then they evolved into technological advancement. We'll go down there in a few minutes, but you can see this beautiful mural. This was also done by Joe Venus, my neighbor, depicting an Ice Age scene. And there's a short-faced bear down there we're going to go see. It's pretty cool. Here's another view of the mammoth. A lot of times we'll find things that are made out of stone or ceramic, but organics are far less likely to preserve. And you have what's left of the hide of a bighorn sheep. It's very rare. And again, the hocks, which are kind of on the feet here, which you see the feet, those are really valuable for use with moccasins. There's horns of bighorn sheep. And the ancient peoples of this area often depict bighorn sheep. You can see here's another Joe Venus painting back here. And again, you can see the presence of live bighorns and the bighorn sheep ever prominent in this area. We do know people hunted them, but not nearly as much as other animals. We believe that bighorn sheep were meaningful in other ways because they are not the most common thing that we see in the food middens and where people left remains of what they ate, but they are the most common petroglyph we see in the area. Have a clay figure in a cradle board. So it's almost wonders if this is more like a toy. And you can see how this was found in the representation. This kind of figurine, this sort of face, if you can see it, is normally called a pilling figure. But again, this particular artifact looks like it was probably either ceremonial or a toy. There's other altered tools, bones, antlers that were again shaped and used for many different things, and even more organics. This is incredibly rare. This is a deer headdress, what's left of a deer headdress. There's depictions up above showing some modern depictions of people wearing headdresses with buffalo horns and pronghorn antelope horns. And we see this also with ancient petroglyphs, but it's very rare to have an actual piece left over from an ancient headdress. There's more organics with deer hocks and ancient sandals. But these are very valuable too because what they can tell us about the organics of the time. We can do DNA tests on these, find out what species they were, and find out when they lived. So the use of fiber was so important that if you had spare time and you had fiber available, you would use it and then save it later on as a trade item. So there's a lot of examples of it in here. These fiber bundles. Again, very valuable for trade. There's a slab metate. There's some more stone tools in here. Projectile points. This display goes over a bit with daily life, talking about different corn species and how you would grind things either with like a mortar and a pestle or a mano metate like this. And then this is a display showing some of the different arrow styles. Let's zoom in and look at these different types of projectile points from different tribes. Whatever your tribal affiliation, you're going to learn the way you were taught. And then here's some beautiful bows. Looks like there's a horn bow and a sinew-backed bow made out of juniper. Yeah, the man who taught me how to make sinew-backed bows was the former director here, Don Burge. And those are probably displays that he probably made for this. Here's a mace or club. And here are some corn and beads and a gourd. But now let's go on downstairs. We're going to take a look at some of these displays. There's a pit house down there. There's a teepee. There's a mammoth. There's this giant bison latifrons from the Ice Age. We're going to take a look at these things. This is a modern recreation of a petroglyph panel, well, pictograph panels painted kind of southwest of here. That is believed to date all the way back to the Ice Age. It's a very unusual style and patterns. Now there's similar patterns to this in Sago Canyon. I've done a video on Sago Canyon before, and I'll plug in some clips showing some of those pictographs. But some of these styles are very old, very unique. Now these styles over here are what the people we call the Fremont people. These are really special. This is an atlatl, and it's not a very big one, which makes me wonder if this is for a younger person to use. But an atlatl throws a dart, which is like an arrow that's 6 feet long, has a foreshaft, and you can see that foreshaft. So this came before bows and arrows, and it's really neat to see an intact one. These are pilling figures. And there's another painting by Joe Venus. Pilling figures were not fired. These are made out of raw clay. They're very distinct. Let me zoom in a little here. They're very distinct. And they were usually bundled together, male and female. You'd have a couple of them, a male and female, bundled together, bundled, wrapped up in leather, and hidden away in a rock crevice. So whatever they were, they had enormous significance. And over here, we have a cutaway of what it'll be like in a pit house. Pit houses were half above and half below ground. They had a ladder to get down in. Some people believe that later on that kivas came from this idea. But the nice thing about them is that on the outside, they're very insulated. They're insulated from the heat in the summer and from the cold in the winter. Would have been a dark way to live underground. But again, this is a really good display showing all the different plants and herbs. And back there, if you can see, very famously, there is can't see it very well, but a rabbit coat being made. Take rabbit furs and you wrap each fur around a bit of cordage, and then you sew all those together until you get a blanket or a piece of clothing. So again, this is a very good job. Oh, here we go. Here's an intact rabbit blanket. So those probably would have been mostly all the same color. These are made out of modern farm rabbits, but you get the idea. So instead of just doing a pelt, you would cut each rabbit fur into strips and you wrap those strips around a line of cordage, and then you sew all of those together in rows, and you get this style. So again, this is a good interpretive display. It's got things to show what everything in this structure is. But again, this is a cutaway. The structure would have been half above ground, half below ground, and this is put together as if you cut it in half and saw down in. Now this is not going to give too much information on this. You see this T aperture, this door. This is often just thought of as being a southwestern thing, but in truth, this is actually something that starts at Chaco and radiates out down to Paquimé, Mexico, and throughout the American Southwest, but it's more than just a design element. We know at Paquimé, they made actual altars in this shape that were freestanding altars that had offerings on top. So whatever this shape is, this doorway, it's something more than just a design element. So looking back in here, this is interesting. I was just at this site earlier today in a rainstorm. I'll show you a little drone image. So this is what it looked like when it was intact. So I guess this is from an excavation, that some of the items that were from there. And again, there's a way to see some of the cordage that was made, some of the fiber work, and a loom for weaving. Yeah, this is a new display. I didn't remember this one. So again, this right here, yeah, I'll show you images of what it looks like from a drone shot. Here's some more ceramic vessels. And again, that Zentangle style is what we normally see, and then rarely like this, you'll see figurative depictions of humans or animals in the center of that pot, but that's very rare. This is a depiction of Hovenweep. I'll put some pictures in this of Hovenweep. Hovenweep is very unusual style architecture. I went there and got some amazing shots at night. Some really cool night photos with the Milky Way there. But it's interesting to see it depicted in full. And this is an enormous piece of ceramic. It's like 2 feet across. Looks like it had to be pieced back together. But still, it's incredible that it's lasted. This needs to be reset up. We used to have this set up here. Now it seems to be sloping forward. But this actually, it's all nice. It's all made out of leather. Where nowadays, you know, like my teepee that I have at my house is all made out of canvas. But modern teepees are huge. Teepees were originally used in the era where there were no horses. Your only draft animal was a dog or yourself. And so if you're going to haul those teepee poles around, you're going to want it to not be huge. I don't know, this is maybe 9 feet tall, right where maybe 10 feet, right where they come together. It's tiny compared to modern teepees. But this is what was used in the earliest days as a travel shelter for hunter-gatherers. And this is what was used even into the horse era. Early teepees were not very big. You don't want to carry extra weight. This is a good display. So you have a net woven out of cordage. It's an ancient net. And there's a good image behind showing how this was utilized. You would make a bunch of nets, and then people would scare rabbits into the nets. And it's a better way than hunting. It's a good way to get food. All right, here is the mammoth. Now, we had a lot of different types of woolly elephants in Utah during the Ice Age. We had woolly mammoths, Columbian mammoths, steppe mammoths, gomphotheres, platybelodons, and mastodons. And the biggest was a Columbian mammoth, which I believe this is a Columbian mammoth. And I remember when they were installing this, and the thing that we kept saying was, most dinosaurs are no bigger than this. There are some, notably, that are much larger, but most dinosaurs are not really any bigger than this. Okay, weighs as much as a T-Rex. And again, look at the feet. The feet are splayed out, separated, and had a fatty pad underneath to support their weight. Then we also have good display of an atlatl being used. So you got a human hunter here. And this weapon is an atlatl, and it's throwing a dart. And again, these are what were used to hunt mammoths. It's incredible that something so flimsy and so small in the hands of an expert can take down prey so large. Now this over here is bison latifrons. It's like 9 to 10 to sometimes 12 foot wide horns. This is an Ice Age bison that we had here in the New World. And over here, we have a mastodon. Now, mastodons were browsers. They had chewing teeth. Mammoths were grazers. Come on, focus. Focus, come on. Okay, it's not gonna focus. Anyways, so mastodons were in the forests, eating leaves and branches and pine needles and stuff like that. So they're a bit different. This is the biggest bear that ever lived. I got a great skull of one of these in my collection. This is the biggest bear that ever lived. It's called a short-faced bear. And its closest living relative is actually the Andean bear, or the sun bear, which is the smallest bear in existence today. This is a big individual. My skull is even bigger than that. It's an even bigger individual, but look at the spread on those feet. Huge. Just absolutely incredible. Imagine that thing standing up on its hind legs. This is a dire wolf. We have a lot of these from the La Brea tar pits in California. Bigger than a gray wolf, but not much bigger, but a very powerful predator. Then we have saber-tooth Smilodon fatalis. I got one of these skeletons too. Smilodon is perceived to be this epic super hunter, but it was actually a specialist in hunting camelids. It could hunt horses and zebras too, but it mostly hunted camels and llamas. We know this from DNA. We know this from tests of how structural tests. But again, a very powerful cat. Now in back, you can see this beautiful mural painted by Joe Venus. And there's a little copy here talking about what all the animals are. But this is, 10,000 years ago, what this area would have looked like. So you can see in the distance there's camels, there's mammoths and mastodons, Smilodon, several different species of bison, jaguars, golden eagles, or not jaguars, there were jaguars here, but there's a cougar, there's a badger, muskox. We had, people don't know about it, but we had muskox here. There's an Ice Age hunter with a dog. There's a short-faced bear. There's a giant ground sloth in back there. There's an Ice Age hunter camp. And again, you have some Clovis culture hunters hauling off mammoth tusks to use to make part of their housing. So again, this is a really cool mural. And this is the original, but again, you can buy painted copies. It's pretty neat. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing this museum, this Prehistoric Museum in Price, Utah. It's a museum, again, I love this place. I used to work here, and they're still doing great things, and it's a great place to go. Great place to see both archaeological and paleontological discoveries. And they still keep adding and still keep doing new things. So I hope you'll go ahead and give this museum a visit. But if you can't make it out, I hope this video helped you get some enjoyment and learning a thing or two. But as always, I appreciate your support on these videos. And just always remember, life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.